good morning to everyone. It's great to be here. I first want to give a shout out to the WBCA and the organizers of this weekend's events. I love this community because there are always people who engage it creatively, engage it intellectually, the way we are doing it today. I'm going to speak, obviously, in my role as a local city councilor, as a local politician who basically fought two elections, both on this project here, which is related to St. Clair, and of course St. Clair itself, and I have the scars to prove it, and I'll show them to you as we go through the presentation. Maybe I'll start just with the pictures, because I'm going to refer to them back and forth, and because the pictures tell 1,000 words, and apply to various points that I'm going to make. Well, I can't see them from here. Interesting, they called it the subway. That's actually Lansdowne. It was because it went underneath the track, they called it a subway in 1932 when they built that section. Go ahead. Shows the old streetcars, the PCC streetcar, President's Conference car that finished sometime in the 1990s. We had several hundred of them, and they finished their work in the 1990s. The new CLRVs, as they are called, and they are at the end of their life, and they are being retired as the brand new vehicles. The next one, this shows you the CLRV in the new right-of-way. These are the new ones that are coming down. They've already been on St. Clair, but they were what they call non-revenue vehicles. They're testing them. They're getting the kinks out, and they're going to be coming to St. Clair in 2016 or 2017. But they look fantastic. 4 doors, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a short, 4 doors will open. And with the Presto card, you will, when you're on the passenger island, you will be deemed to be in a paid area. And so 4 doors will open and you'll be able to access it along the entire route. This next one emphasizes the point. It is much safer. Just came out in the Toronto Star a couple of days ago, 50% safer than it used to be. We have not yet done a study as the TTC or as the city on whether St. Clair was a success. And there are measurements that you can have. You can have modal split. How many people take cars? How many people take public transit? You can use safety as a touchstone. Property values, have they gone up relative to the surrounding community, or have they remained stable or gone down? Those are the rental rates, the cost of rental. The reason why the TTC and the city have not done an assessment yet, one of the reasons is the mayor. The other reason, because it hurts his narrative. The other reason is that at the end of St. Clair by Weston Road, the junction is being redone. And there used to be this shortcut that you could take along Davenport if you were in a car. And that is shut down because of the Union Pearson link. And that used to take about 20 to 30% of the traffic that tried to get underneath the bridge. Used to actually take a shortcut and do that little jig. We're not going to study it until that basically project is finished and we can study it in and of itself and not have it interfered with by that other piece. So that study will happen next year. But I'll bet you $1 to a donut that by every measurement, safety, modal split, TTC ridership increases, rental rates, real estate values, that the numbers will look very, very positive. Little anecdote just by way of background as well. I sit behind Doug Ford. And of course the mayor, as Ed referred to yesterday, calls it, and he loves to call it, and he actually has built a career on it. And if you go to the far ends of Etobicoke or Scarborough, when they're discussing light rail on Finch or light rail on Shepherd, they'll say, we don't want to be like the St. Clair disaster. It's part of popular mythology. It may or may not have any basis in reality, but it is part of a popular mythology. So much so that sometimes when Doug is pontificating away about libraries or need to do this or that, I'll yell out, because I sit beside him, I'll catcall, I'll say St. Clair disaster, say St. Clair disaster. So he'll make a comment about the library, and he'll conclude it by saying, and we don't want it like the St. Clair disaster. And then Paul Ainsley will slip me $10 because I got him to say St. Clair disaster. So that's how we're treating his perspective on City Hall. So St. Clair in the year, call it the year 2000, I would say was a tired street. It was nearing its 100th birthday. Its 100th birthday is around this period now. It was a tired street. We had, just in my section of St. Clair, we had $10 to $15 stores. We did not have an active street life. The road was in a bad state of disrepair. There were chunks of concrete that would fall out, sometimes the size of a soccer ball. We needed to do some redevelopment. There was also up until that period, and this is most of my years, frankly, living in this neighborhood, we had absolutely zero development interest. There was no private sector developer was thinking of St. Clair as a place to build even a mid-rise, never mind a higher rise. So we needed to do something, and the St. Clair streetcar track was in the worst state of disrepair, and we worked on basically the proposal to develop this right-of-way. And I want to amplify on Ed Keenan's point. So the project came in at $72-ish million, the St. Clair streetcar project. The budget for it was, when it came to council, was $67 million. So one can say, yes, it went over about $5 million. But there were other things that happened, and the way I would compare it, or the comparison that I would draw, is to you say at home, your partner and you decide to move a wall, and so you open the wall, you start to tear it apart, and then you find there's knob and tube there, there's lead pipes there, and you say, you know what, this little wall that we want moved is actually something that opens up another opportunity. And so when we did St. Clair, and this also then explains the long time that it took to do the construction, the piece for which the TTC is wearing all of it, but it's more complicated. It's always more complicated than that. Because this is a 100-year-old community and the construction project took 5 years, I'll tell you where the 5 years was spent. Year 1.5 was spent with a court case. There was a group of locals who wanted to kill the project, and it took us a year. They got a temporary injunction. It took us a year to basically clean that up. Then Enbridge, that had cast iron pipes throughout throughout the city of Toronto, embarked on a process to basically change them to PVC pipes that basically hardly ever break. The cast iron pipes were breaking at a rate of 1 per 4 kilometers per year, so they needed to renovate their plant. Underground, they said, okay, now that you're ripping up the road, we want in on it. So that took a year to basically fix that project. Then the 2006 election happened, and during that time, the businesses on St. Clair, the pictures that Jay showed, there were a few of them that showed the bird nests of I call them bird nests, the hydro installation. Some of those same poles were the original poles when they built the street. I remember them because I used to compare them with the old pictures. The local businesses and the local community said, now's the time, basically, to underground this plant. And thankfully they did. If you lived in the ice storm, all the people south of St. Clair did well during the ice storm because the plant on St. Clair was undergrounded. That piece was a separate project, and it was $30 million. During that time, 2006 or 7, the Walkerton, so court case, Enbridge, Hydro, the next piece, this is year 4, now we're into year 4. TTC still hasn't done much. 4th year was the Walkerton inquiry, recommendations came out, and there was an upgrading of water utility that was being demanded through that inquiry. So the piece that had not yet been developed or redeveloped from a TTC perspective, it was deemed to need a new water main. And I was told, I didn't see it, but the water main that connects and services all these neighborhoods here for water comes from Winston Churchill Reservoir, an R.C. Harris plant. The pipe is about this big, and you don't want to see what was inside that pipe. So that got all renovated. That was year 4. Year 5 comes along. TTC finishes its work in 9 months. So it was a 5-year project, but there were reasons for this. There's reasons for the costs. What happened on St. Clair and what happened on St. Clair was a TTC project became a city building project. It became an urban revitalization and renewal project. And that explains both the timeline. Oh, and the other piece, of course, was the parking lots. We had no parking lots in Ward 21, and at the end of the process, we had 6 parking lots. That's another $10 million. So the way the mayor pitches his story is that this, and he says $47 million. I don't know where he gets $47 million from. That's not in any document. The $67 million project, yes, if you add in all those other pieces, and I don't know what Enbridge spent, yes, it could be $120 million. But it really was 4 or 5 different projects that came together that you need to do. And frankly, we're doing it on Eglinton, Old Plant, as you go through and do the tunnel boring. Old Plant, especially the underground stuff, is being renovated as we speak. So that's that. So what I'm going to do is, that's by way of background. I'm going to do a David Letterman, 10 things I've learned as a local councillor during this process. First learning is streets are living things. They have their rises and their falls. They have their cycles. Debates of old become, history is not linear. History is more cyclical. That's my insight being in this for a few decades. The debates of the 1920s and 1930s are the debates of the turn of the century as well. This area here along St. Clair had, between Dufferin and Bathurst, had 5 movie theaters and places of entertainment in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and into the 60s. Then a different form of entertainment, the mega complexes, the cineplexes took form. And so the one at Bathurst Street, the one at Vaughan Road, the one at Christie, the one at Oakwood, and the one at Dufferin, they fell into disrepair, and basically some of them got gutted, some of them got torn down, and things changed. So streets are living things. They go into cycles. And that's something that I think we need to be conscious of. Sometimes we think of, oh, that's the way St. Clair was. No, actually, St. Clair has gone through moments of up and moments of down. I would propose that right now we're in an up moment. St. Clair is seeing an uptick, and that's being reflected in all kinds of new businesses and all kinds of new developments happening along the street. So that's learning number 1. Learning number 2 is change is hard, and community processes can be tough. Now, sometimes we think of ourselves, I remember an old prof of mine saying, you know, Aristotle said man, or humans, are rational animals. But I would submit that man or humans are a drop of reason in an ocean of emotion. And try undertaking an infrastructure development like this place here, or that place on this place, the Witchwood Barns, or St. Clair, and you find how people's passions sometimes our passions overtake our sense of reason. This place is interesting. I would say that that one thing that public policy managers or public policy or people who want to engage in these infrastructures need to appreciate more is the psychological processes that communities need to go through to have these projects realized. Some people, when you show them, and I guess this is the gift of architects, they can see the project. They can really see it and feel the project when they see a map on the ground. They can bring it to their mind and image it. Okay, this is how it would really work in the real world. Some people can see it when they see a fixed model, and they can kind of image it. Some people can't do that. In fact, many people can't do it. What I would say is they are experiential learners. They have to touch it, see it, feel it, and then they're okay with it. And that's what I think we experienced here at the Witchwood Barns. When this place here, pre-construction, that was about 10 years ago, This was an abandoned, derelict site. The raccoons had a wonderful time here, and young people had a wonderful time here doing all those kinds of things that they shouldn't have been doing, including riding the bumper cars or using the PCC vehicles that were stored here. They didn't have keys. They would go inside and just bump them back and forth. And there's all kinds of confessions that have come out in the last 5-10 years of people who are now older saying the shit that they used to do around here. But anyway, it was an abandoned site, boarded up. I can understand why people said, you're going to say that? It took, in those days, that term, adaptive reuse, was not part of Toronto's vocabulary. It just wasn't part of our vocabulary. Now it's part of everyone's vocabulary. We know what it means. It means breathing new life into old bones. At that time, it was something that we basically, as Torontonians, cut our teeth on, and this was the project. The brickworks, they didn't have to go through any of that. But here, we had an intense community conversation, let's put it that way, around this. And so appreciating how people go through change, that it's not just a matter of saying, I'm going to do this, or we're going to do this, and selectively go forward. It's more complicated than that. And public policy managers need to be conscious of the human side of these transformative projects. The third point that I would say related to the two that I just mentioned is embrace the complexity. St. Clair's a great example. That was a complex project. It wasn't a TTC project. It became a whole urban revitalization project. It's related to the businesses. It's related to the water. It's related to the hydro. It's related to the sense of community and sense of place that people have. That's complicated. And so you need to work on many levels and in many areas to make that project happen. A fourth learning is community engagement is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. One of the things I say about the Ward 21 community is that we want to be part of everything. We eat our young sometimes. That's how passionate we are about changes and developments in our community. Here we used all kinds of formats. We had meetings for the dog off leash area, where to put it, where to put in the water play area, where to put in whether this covered street should be half a covered street or not half a covered street. All of these were the subject of not just Joe going with Artscape or the city and figuring it out, but it involved a ton of community participation. One of the slides, the next one, okay, this is the Witchwood Barns, of old, of new. You see that woman right in the middle there, Roscoe Hanford, who does the farmers market here? She gave so many tours, and she would sit at council meetings and just knit, as she was watching council make the decisions around the Witchwood Barns. And of course, there was the Tattlewood Heritage Association that inserted itself in all these conversations. You know what happens at the end of that process? It's longer, it's more difficult, it's sometimes highly conflictual, but at the end, people feel that they own that project. They don't feel it's a city project. They feel, this community feels that the Witchwood Barns was about them. They own this project, and the WBCA is actually the living incarnation of that thought. Fifth learning, public spaces are important, and they're growing in importance. Now, I have a theory, untested, that goes something like this. As we create smaller and smaller living units, I can't believe the size of the condos that are on the market now, what we're essentially doing is saying that's our private space, that's where we sleep, but where we live is in the public realm. And so sidewalks become important, libraries become important, gathering places like the Witchwood Barns become ever important, because that's where I actually do my living. That's where I do my living. And so all the debates that you see with Spacing Magazine, with public space committees and all of that, it's really about people reclaiming public space, partly because they need to, partly because it has become our living room. It has become the place where people gather and where they form a community. Sixth learning is we need to embrace arts and culture, always, everywhere. The TTC is a great organization. and it's run by engineers. I'll give them another shot in a moment with another point. I love engineers. I really love engineers. But they don't get the arts and culture thing. They really don't. Infrastructure cannot be just about the engineers. You have to make room for, and now we do actually have a policy at the TTC where 0.1% of the project cost is dedicated to arts and culture. So on one of the slides, you maybe can remember it, or just go to St. Clair, you'll see we paid $500,000 for art above each of the stations along the route. We wanted to do more, but then the budget had to be mixed and matched a little bit to accommodate some of the legal costs. So art and culture, Salsa on St. Clair, this place here, people don't feel that it is a frill. They feel it is of the essence of who they are as human beings, that they want art and culture. They want to be part of living communities. It's that bread and roses theme. Bread's not enough. Roses are it's not the hierarchy of needs, and so you throw away the ones that are higher when you fulfill the lower ones. That's not the way it works. You need both at each and every step. Seventh point is managing the construction process. I'll try to wrap this up quickly. I'm realizing that I'm at 20 minutes. Again, what happened on St. Clair is we realized something as a city and as a TTC, and we did it a little bit on St. Clair, but we're doing it a lot on Eglinton. And that is making sure that it's not only an engineer-dominated process. You need to have the community in there, you need to have the businesses in there, you need to have the local politicians in there, you have to have the provincial politicians in there. All the stakeholders need to be part of the construction process itself. Otherwise, things fall through the cracks. And I'll give you a great example of something that fell through the cracks that was part of the visioning. And it's something really simple, but this is the fine-grained stuff that drive businesses crazy. Is just walk along St. Clair and look at where the hydrants are. They're mid-block. You'd think that, and we actually put this in the plan, and we discussed this as the business community. The business community said, why don't you put them at the ends where there's no parking anyway? That will create another 2 parking spots on each block. And they said, yes, 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 but somehow between the person at that meeting and the engineer who designed it, they stayed in the middle of the blocks, and we lost 10 parking spots. So making sure that businesses had accessibility when they were redoing the sidewalks. That is absolutely critically important. And the engineers don't realize it, but the BIA is sitting at the table. They realize it. Point number 8, social inclusion is key. During these process of revitalization of local communities, who gets squeezed? It's the social service agencies, the people working with the homeless, the socially marginalized, and so on. One of the great things, I think, in this community, we have Humewood House over there for very young girls who are moms. We have Skills for Change. We have Out of the Cold programs. We have all St. Stephen's on Bathurst. We have institutions that basically take care of those of us and those times that we ourselves are in need. And we need to make sure that that's a part of it. So every opportunity that certainly I have, and I think the community has, we make sure that we bring in those who need extra support. 2 more points. Communication is key. On Eglinton, what we've done, and we learned it on St. Clair, is that the local councillor can't be the one who regularly updates the community on what is actually happening. Rumors happened with this project here at the Witchwood Barns. People thought condos were going up. People imagined all kinds of things. So rumors would have babies, and there'd be more rumors. And every 3 months, you had to send something out to clarify what was happening and what was not happening. Same thing on St. Clair. There were all kinds of rumors going around that were true and untrue. We did tons of workshops and did our best to communicate. Now we're institutionalizing that and doing that on Eglinton. The last point is local leadership matters. There's civic leadership inside the bureaucracy, and my hat would go off to Mitch Stambler in the TTC, who's the head of the planning department, who was dogged in making sure that this project happened. At the local community level, I can mention lots of folks. I'll point out Roscoe Hanford and Peter McKendrick. We named a gallery after him. He passed away a couple of years ago, who were dogged in making sure that this place happened. And yes, political leadership matters as well. When you have inside City Hall leadership, community leadership, and political leadership, you can transform a lot of things at the local level. So those are 10 things that I learned. I think at the end of the day, we birthed this project, we birthed St. Clair, and now we're living the fruits. Thank you very much, everyone.